Welcome to the High Agency Podcast with your host, Noah Revoy. Hello, everyone. Today I'm here with Anne, Dia, and King David to talk about dating in 2021 under lockdown. You'll notice that some of our guests have Australian accents, so they have some super lockdowns in Australia. Basically, you wear your 6 masks and take your anal swab for COVID while you're not allowed to leave the house. So apparently they're having a lot of fun down there in Australia. But yeah, it's something that people are facing around the Western world. Not only was dating hard, dating was challenging before the lockdowns in COVID. And this has really accelerated some difficult trends. And I think people who aren't in the dating market and who are not talking to people who are dating and advising them regularly don't know the difficulties that young people are going through right now. So I want to welcome you guys here and say hello to you all. If you want, you can introduce yourself, maybe starting, at the top right and going clockwise.
Hi everyone, I'm Anne, one of the Aussies. I'm a bit of a dodgy Aussie. I was living in London for 5 years and I'm now in Greece. So I haven't been in Australia for a little while with their restrictions, but I've definitely had restrictions in London and now Greece. Passing it on to David.
Oh. There we go. All right. Hey all, I'm David. I host my own podcast, the Arsenal Podcast. And I use Twitter as a platform to help direct other men through their lives and also to quit porn, because that is a big issue that definitely plays into the modern dating market.
That's good that you do that.
Yeah.
I'm Dia. I'm a YouTuber among other different types of things, and I also talk about different topics. Rarely do I talk about dating, but I'm happy to be doing this podcast. And I have a lot of haters, and so I like it when people like Noah Revoy take me on because he knows how to read people, so I know that he knows I'm legit.
Yeah. I think that's interesting thing you brought up about reading people. We used to have to, I grew up in a bad neighborhood. So reading people was the difference between getting the crap kicked out of you or not. Someone's coming towards you and you look at them and you're like, that guy wants to start a fight with somebody. And I'm a little kid, so I'm gonna skedaddle. I'm getting out of here. And or someone's coming up to you and you're like, that person's mugging people. I think I'm gonna get out of here. And it was a safety issue. So you learn pretty quick. If you get beaten up every time you make a human judgment mistake, you tend to learn really quickly. And it's, I'm good now at reading people too, because it's a big part of my job. I have to get in with a client, and within an hour, I need to know them well within an hour.
And you do.
And that skill, I've been developing that since I was a kid. That skill is really lost today. People date for years and they don't know each other. People are in friendship circles and they're like, I don't really know that guy's last name. We just don't connect like we used to. And I think this is one of the reasons why people are having a really hard time getting into relationships. People will say, oh, men today are commitment phobic, or even women, they'll say they're commitment phobic. And that's a natural response to not knowing how to read people. If you can't read people, you're going to be, if you can't read someone that you like and you're not sure whether they're being honest with you, that's going to scare you in making a commitment to them. That's a natural response, I think, to that.
100% agree with you on that one. I think that's why there are so many issues these days where, couples do get into a lot of unhealthy sort of relationships eventually because they don't know how to read each other. That's what I find anyway. It's very different to read a stranger that you're like, that person does look kind of dodgy. It might sound rude, but you can kind of be like, no, they're looking at other people. They look like they're about to steal something. But when you're with someone in a relationship, it's very different. Sometimes you can't always read the person that you're with, maybe because you've got your own blockages, I think.
Yeah, a lot of us are, we're raised by our parents, and our parents have issues. and our parents will program us to ignore their issues. And that will blindside us to those kinds of issues in the people we want to date. It's not that we don't notice them, we just don't notice they're dangerous.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, I also think women, generally speaking, purposely ignore the red flags, and they know that this isn't right and this isn't right. But I want to be in a relationship, and I'm going to ignore it because I think that I can help change this person, and it doesn't really matter. So you may be reading the person right even whilst you're in the relationship, but you purposely choose to ignore it.
Yeah.
The fixer.
Yeah. Well, and that is something that is interesting is female intuition. I talk about that in our course, and I mentioned that a lot of women actually have very good intuition, but for them, it's really by feeling, and it's a gut instinct. And since they can't rationalize it, they can't figure out rationally what it is they don't like, they think that there's something wrong with their intuition, and they're told to ignore it. Anything that's really feminine or really masculine, we're told to ignore in society. And intuition is something very feminine, that kind of gut instinct. And women are told to ignore it because it's part of the depolarization of the sexes that's been pushed upon us, pushing people towards kind of a neutral, a non-sexless entity. And one of that, when women lose the trust they have in their gut instinct, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. Men, we like to analyze it. We usually come to the same conclusions often as women, but we'll analyze the decision. And because we did that, it's easier for us to feel confident in our decisions. It doesn't mean we're necessarily better at deciding when it comes to people. We just feel more confident, so we tend to listen to ourselves more, whereas women almost always end up with a bad feeling, and then they ignore it, and then they end up in trouble.
Oh, bloody hell, I've been there twice. You know that very well, Noah, as well as Anne.
Well, absolutely. And part of it is that all of us tend to be dating in a vacuum now. Where, in the past, when we would date, there was a period where a long period, most of human history, where marriages were arranged or semi-arranged. Your parents would say, okay, Dia, we're at church, there's these 4 guys, and they're in the right age group, they're the right kind of family, they're the right kind of match for you. Which one do you like? We'll arrange a meeting between you, and if you guys like each other, you can date. And dating really just meant we're going to be engaged. Basically, it was straight to the engagement, and you get married next week. The reason being is there was a very big homogeneity in belief systems. You all went to the same church, you were all from the same basic culture, and so you had very similar expectations of what it meant to be married. You didn't have to have a discussion. Do you want kids? It's like, yeah, of course I want kids. Everyone wants kids. Who doesn't want kids? If you didn't want kids, you would have joined the church as a nun or a monk. Mm-hmm. So everyone knows if you didn't do that, you want kids, right? Nowadays, we're asking really strange questions like, do you want to have a monogamous relationship?
Are you gender neutral? Are you gender neutral?
Yeah. Were you born a woman? This is a kind of thing that young people are contending with now. Is everything is up for discussion, including things that our ancestors would have assumed were beyond discussing. And so we've way overcomplicated dating and relationships at the same time that we took out all the support systems. Very few people can go to their parents and say, Mom, Dad, what do you think of my girlfriend or boyfriend? And get real good, secure answers and protection. So many of us our parents are divorced. I mean, you can listen to divorced people about marriage. It maybe they know, or maybe they don't. It's pretty hard for us as for young people to know who to trust.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think one thing to tack off of with the whole coming to parents for advice is, half of it is the advice they're giving was more so applicable while they were dating, right? They're not as aware of the nuances of, 2021. So what would have worked for them makes sense to advise now, but it's like, hey, that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. It used to be you could pretty much date anybody in your church and it's going to work out. Okay. Nowadays, hardly anyone's in a church. If they are, there's not a lot of young people in church. There might not be anybody eligible in their church.
There isn't.
And not only that, the people in your church may not even agree on scripture, let alone agree on what it means to be married.
But it shouldn't matter about church because there are like communities of other types of people, right?
Yes,
like
exactly. There's other types, yeah. There are other communities you can go to.
But there's still disagreements on anything and everything and ideology and faith and this and that. And every single community meets its own challenges. And so ultimately, it's not as easy as it was, and it never will be again because of what you said. There's so many different types of people. There's so many different types of ideologies. What the hell are you supposed to do with all of that?
That's a good point.
One of the pieces of advice my dad gave me that actually I do think transcends the generations, right? And he told me you don't have to worry so much so about a woman's, how do I say this, beliefs, some of her ideologies, or even spiritual development, because generally speaking, she's going to take the lead of the man, but that requires a very well-rounded, a very strong man to take up that role. She's not going to just lean into anybody.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Brings up something important. Typically, men need to take the initiative in the starting of a relationship. This used to mean even in the times when we had arranged marriages, it was the fathers would take the initiative. So at some point it was men taking the initiative of arranging the marriages. And then when we got into the era where dating was more common, it was usually the men asking the women out. And there's a good reason for that. It creates a certain dynamic where the man is leading, where he's demonstrating his willingness to take the initiative in every part of the relationship so that he will be the leader as time goes on. And nowadays, men are trained out of that leadership position. There's very few areas in life where we can actually lead anywhere, and we're brainwashed out of it.
Yeah.
And this is why, like with my dating, I was talking to Dia about this. It's so if a man doesn't feel comfortable or isn't being, able to be that sort of strong man type and taking initiative and asking out and all that, how are females meant to get in touch with their feminine side and trust them? So if you don't have that trust, it's tricky. Like I feel like it's, all we sort of want, I don't know, I'm just talking about you and me, dear, I suppose, is like a strong, I don't even know if you want this, a strong man to sort of take initiative and be trustworthy in that sort of way. But if I feel like someone isn't that trustworthy, that's when I start being more controlling, like I'd be more masculine, which is not what I want. I don't like that.
Well, and what you're describing is the entire failing of men in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, that allowed feminism to even exist. Is a lot of men were not doing their job. They weren't taking the lead. They weren't properly looking after their families. Most people forget that the feminist movement came out of not out of the suffragettes. It came out of the prohibitionist, the dry movement, the movement to ban alcohol by women whose families have been destroyed because their husbands drank themselves either to death or drank them into poverty. And there were so many men doing that women said, look, we kind of have to ban alcohol. These guys are not doing their job. They're not looking after us. It's the alcohol's fault. Well, it's really the man's fault, but it's the alcohol's fault. And then, hey, you can't ban alcohol. You're not allowed to vote. And so the women said, oh, okay, in order to ban alcohol, we got to get the vote. So then they became suffragettes. And it really originally was about wanting to ban alcohol, wanting to protect their families. And so women had to start acting like men because men weren't acting like men. And that's not just in your case. That's what happens in the absence of strong men. Women need to protect themselves.
So they take over.
We'll start to shift into that mode.
Yeah.
It's difficult. No, it is it is a hard thing because once you shift into that mode, how do you shift back?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly what the women are dealing with. And for me, also, I think my situation's a little bit more not unique, but definitely different to Anne in that, like, I am a Christian, and so I am looking for certain things that I wish I'd gotten in my 20s. I wish I had been more bold. But in my conversations with you, Noah, I have become more bold. Like, I'll go up to a guy who is a mechanic and out of the blue be like, hey, I want to go out on a date with me. And then, like, the next day we're on a date. Like, so that's usually the role of a man. Usually the woman drops the hanky, the guy picks the hanky up. I'm not even dropping the hanky. I'm throwing it in their face.
Yeah, and it gets to be an issue of sometimes you have to do what you have to do to get through it.
Yeah.
And I don't understand this because I've always been a very bold person. That's just my personality. I remember when I was 4 years old, people wearing muddy boots into church and me cussing them out, not literally swearing at them, but telling them to get out of God's house with your muddy boots on, go clean them and then come in, have some respect. And turn out that it was the pastor of the church. But, and I literally didn't, I found out and I didn't care. And got smacked over, but not by my parents, by him. That was my personality. So when I was 2 years old, my dad taught me how to walk up to strangers, introduce myself, say hello, get to know them, find out their name, and charm people. That was what I was taught to do. And so I've taught my son to do that, and I'll teach the babies as soon as they're able to speak. It became natural for me. And so I will talk to guys and I say to them, go and what do you want? You want to talk to that woman? Well, then go and speak to her. Don't try and take her out on a date. Just go and speak to her. Just have a pleasant, warm human interaction with her. But they can't do that.
They're scared.
Well, one reason why is they pedestalize women. Many men, especially younger men, they pedestalize women, in which they end up intimidating themselves because they see, oh, she's so gorgeous, she's so pretty. So they value her too high in their own eyes to the point where they're so scared of either rejection or messing up on their approach because they think if they make one mistake, she's not going to bat an eye towards them. So they're they're so meticulous when it comes to their approach, what they're going to say, all of those things leading up to it, that they end up overwhelming themselves and they just don't want to do it. They give up before they've even tried.
Well, this is because there's not really women in their social circle, or they don't have a social circle. Growing up, when I got around the age where I was wanting to start dating seriously, I wasn't really interested in dating until I was ready to start getting married.
Wow.
So when I was I just wasn't. And when I was in my late teens, I started dating, and I dated girls that I'd known already for a while. And there was multiple girls in my social circles that I could have asked out. I know for sure they would have said yes, and probably would have said yes if I just come up and said, will you marry me? And so I had no fear of rejection because it's like, I already got all these other girls that I already know that I can go and get with if I want. So when I would approach a woman, it was like, I didn't care. I would say the most ridiculous and crazy things to her because I didn't worry about any kind of rejection because it didn't hurt me. When I got married, I even cared less.
Wow.
And I actually started to try to push young, attractive women away who would not push them away, but make a barrier. And I found that saying no and being more disagreeable and more bold actually made them like me more. If you're a guy, the biggest thing you can do to turn a woman off is be nice to her. And I'm not saying be a jerk, but just be bold and talk and say the things you actually believe, even if they're stupid. And even if you express them poorly, and say them without any shame or fear. And that's a huge turn on to women. They want a guy who might be wrong, but at least is willing to speak, you know. One of the viewers asked the question, should women avoid asking men out to refrain from switching roles? Generally, that's the right advice. And I think most of the time that's true. There are times, though, when you got to do what you got to do. And it depends to some degree on your culture. There are parts of the world where men are still fairly masculine, normally frontier areas. So you go to the US, you go to a farming community, or you go to a place where people have to be very bold, they're going to ask you out. There's cultures, subcultures, which are bold and don't have fear of that. And then you'll get to other places. You get in any urban area in the West, and the men are almost women. And your choice is between asking one of them out or never getting asked out sometimes. And it's a terrible choice. Women shouldn't be in that position. But that's what it is.
Yeah, I think it ultimately comes out. Yeah, I don't think women should necessarily ask men out, but there's a way that they can do it almost indirectly, right? Where they're kind of like you had said, Dia, where you throw the handkerchief at him. You know, there are ways to do that to get a man's attention, because sometimes us men, I mean, we can be quite oblivious. The otherwise obvious hints sometimes go right over our heads.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that most men will not ask out a woman they don't think is interested in them. Now, for men, that's the wrong approach. It's not whether she likes you or not. It's whether you like her or not that should drive whether you ask her out or not. You know, find out if she likes you by asking her out. And that's a hard, because we're in this culture where you have to ask permission for everything.
Oh yeah.
And that's the biggest dry women up like crazy. It's the biggest mistake you can make, is to ask permission to ask her out. No, go just be a man and ask her out. And not even ask her out. I that's how we describe it. But what you say is, I'm going to this place on Friday. I'd really enjoy it if you came with me. I'd like to pick you up, or you can join me, or whatever it happens to be. Apparently now you don't pick the girl up, she joins you. And for safety issues, I guess. This is a good question. How can a man let a woman know she's interested without taking the lead?
How can a woman let a man know?
Yeah, how can a woman let a man know? Through flirting, basically.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Flirting gets a bad reputation because sometimes it's it's very clumsy. And I'm not saying stick your boobs in his face type flirting, but let him know that you enjoy the conversation with him. I'm really enjoying the conversation. Smile at him, look at him, look him in the eyes in a soft way, not like you're staring him down. You know, you're not going to draw on him. You're just you're looking at him like, you know, you appreciate him. It's what we call being receptive. So this sounds very sexual.
How can we do it online? That's what I want to know. I feel like it's a little bit trickier when you're not in person to flirt.
But are you going to meet up with them later, Anne? Would you actually physically meet up with them later, or not, because of the whole COVID and restrictions?
But that's the thing. If you meet up, like, who's going to be asking who to meet up? Do you see what I'm saying? So if, you know,
well, you can say, I've really enjoyed our conversations, and I would love to meet you in person.
Yeah.
Hint,
but
hint,
should the guy say that?
No. The girl should say that. The guy should say when and where. And he should say that without being asked. But unfortunately, a lot of guys, they don't know about that. They just don't know. They don't realize it. And they've been propagandized out of it.
Why are we all so stupid? Like, with the fact that this conversation
I'm
so retarded. I'm in my 30s. This is so retarded.
I'm literally I tell guys, like, you got to start thinking like a caveman. Me like you, we go there, eat food. You know, like, start thinking like a caveman. Caveman doesn't ask for permission. He throws a woman over his shoulder and takes her.
Yeah, you just got to go for it.
Yeah, she's got to go for it. I mean, it's really kicks and fights, we'll let her go. But and that's part of it, is that so you know, people are like, oh, I don't want to get Me Too'd. So I'm not worried. When I'm not worried now, but when I was single, I wasn't worried about getting Me Too. Now, this is a while back. But this Me Too thing's been going on since the dawn of history, women making accusations that aren't true. This is not a random or recent thing. I wasn't worried about it because I was careful about not being in a situation where I'd be alone with the woman, or where, you know, the Mike, now he's a traitor, but the Mike Pence rule, you know, don't be alone with women that you are not related to or married to, is smart, you know, especially when you're in that initial stage where you can get accusations. So you can be super, super, super bold with women out in public. And I'm talking about bold. Don't be sexual. You don't need to be sexual. You need to be bold. And there's a difference to that. It's, you know, going after what you want is not the same as being sexual. You don't need to be sexual. In fact, that is often a turnoff. There is a way to be bold and make it clear, because you're not in our group, at least. Your goal is not to sleep with the woman as fast as possible if you're a man. Because we're talking normally to guys who are more traditional, more conservative. Most of my clients are like that. They're looking for a long-term relationship. And so your goal is to get to know her better. Your goal is to see, is there potential for a long-term relationship here? And so be real bold about what you want. You know? Yeah, let's go. I want to get together with you sometime. And you're not going to get Me Too'd over this. The guys who are getting Me Too'd have slept with a dozen women, promised to marry them, and then never married them. Those are the kind of guys that get Me Too'd. It's the guys who are dishonest and lying to women, and they then end up being dishonest and lying back as revenge. And they'll look at that as being reciprocal. That's the kind of guys getting Me Too'd most of the time. There's always the odd young guy who gets set up in some stupid situation, but that's pretty rare. Mostly you just need to don't be an idiot and you don't get Me Too'd.
Yeah. And I like what you said with the being bold. You know, you don't have to, you know, because kind of back to the flirting thing, it doesn't have to be sexual, or it doesn't have to be inherently seductive. It doesn't have to be that for women. It doesn't have to be that for men. You know, so one way that a man can make the most out of an approach or wanting to ask a woman on a date, you know, it really boils down to something as simple as keeping your frame, right? So stand up straight, stick your chest out, maintain eye contact, you know, be firm, speak slowly, and say what you mean. Mm-hmm. You know, all of those good, attractive, confident qualities, most women are going to see that. Like, okay, I like what's going on. Okay.
Talk like a man.
Yeah.
It's just, you'd be surprised how many times in groups with guys, I'm like, take a guy aside and I'm like, you got to start talking like a man. You know, you're not talking like a man. And I explained to him what that is. Like I say it, I expect them, I say it and they know what it means. And half the time, most of the time, they don't even know what it means to talk like a man. What, men and women talk differently? You know, not anymore, but we used to. Go watch an old John Wayne movie and learn how a man talks. You know, we don't talk the same as women. We're if you think about it this way, and this is a very old analogy, the men we penetrate, the women they receive. And this sounds like it's about sex, but it eventually becomes about sex.
Yeah.
But it also comes to social interactions. Now, the man, he is the bold one. He goes into the conversation. He leads into the conversation. He initiates. He gets it started. And the woman, she decides whether or not she'll be receptive to that man. And, you know, sometimes women aren't receptive. Maybe they're just not in the mood to talk to anybody. Maybe they're not receptive because they're in a relationship, or they like somebody and they're hoping that person approaches them, or they just don't like you. But women, when or they don't know how to be receptive, is part of the problem nowadays. But by being receptive, the man pushes a little, the woman accepts. The man pushes a bit more, she accepts a bit more. And it's not pushing sexually, it's pushing for social connection. You know, I talk to people today and I say the main reason you want to approach new people and meet new people and even have friends is to make that kind of warm, social, human interaction that is super pleasurable And people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. I've been locked in my house for 10 months. What do you mean it's pleasurable to associate with other people? No, I'm an introvert. I don't like to talk to other people. Like, no. It doesn't matter how much of an introvert you are. The most introverted person on the planet still enjoys human interaction and socialization. They just only enjoy it in very small groups, one-on-one, one on 2 or 3 people. They don't deal well with large groups. If you're finding that all social interaction is uncomfortable, that's not an introversion issue. That's a unsocialized issue. You're unsocialized.
Mm. Can I just say also that men seem to be as broken as women? Like, obviously the dynamics have changed, no thanks to feminism, among other things, but also men gossip. I've only been around men lately, which I've completely disassociated myself with. Well, they did it first, but anyway, they are female in every sense of the word. They act and behave in a female manner. They like to gossip. They like to get revenge. Like, that's something women in their teens do. So it's like, where are the men? Because some of these men work out. Some of these men have the traditional perception out on the surface level of being men, but then at the heart of it, they're children. It's like it's the word that you use, which was man-child.
Yeah. It's not even that they're feminine necessarily. It's that they're men children, and that appears feminine because this is going to sound super misogynistic, but there's not a huge difference between women and children in the way that they approach most situations. And I don't mean that in a negative thing. I mean, if you're a Christian, Christ says to be like children. He wants you to be more innocent and willing to listen and those kind of things when it comes to religious issues. But women are, there's an expression, she's like a child. So women have a natural
youthful exuberance.
Yeah, youthful exuberance. And that's a good thing. And if women lose that actually makes them less attractive. It isn't, I'm not saying this as an insult. It's because women are primarily designed to spend most of their life taking care of children.
Yeah,
and so they have to be able to connect well with children.
Yeah, that's just biologically seems like a truth. That's
yeah, and I mean, you'll see women that are extremely masculine and mature in that way. And like, for example, Ann Coulter, but can you imagine Ann Coulter being your mother?
No, she's so rigid.
Exactly. I mean, I'd love to go have a beer with her, but she's kind of like hanging out with one of the dudes. She's
cool. Yeah.
You don't think of her as someone that you would want as a mother of children. And I think she knows that. That's why she's never had her own kids.
Yeah, sadly. But yeah.
Yeah, she recognizes that. And there are women like that. But most women are fairly childlike, and that's not an insult. That is actually necessary for them to fill their primary biological role. And men who don't grow up, they end up childlike. And since there's a big overlap in that appearance, then they seem feminine. But really what it is they're childlike. And
for sure.
Yeah, no amount of working out will compensate for that. It's really the way to not be like that is to be around mature adult men. And you're around mature adult men because they won't tolerate that kind of behavior, that childish behavior. But there are also men who are successful. They may not all be successful in the same spheres. You might have a guy with 10 kids. You might have another guy, who's really successful in financial things, or another guy who's really successful in politics or whatever. But you'll have a group of men that are mostly all successful. You're probably also have a group of very masculine men, and you probably a group of more mature men. But it's unfortunate that those things used to get basically beaten out of us by life when we were kids.
Not anymore.
That doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, that's sad.
Like we got a lot of fatherless boys. Then we have a lot of boys that were raised by weak fathers, which is just as bad. And so these guys, they don't know how to mature. And if you get a group of them together, they normalize each other's behavior, and then it just goes downhill from there. And I do feel bad for them because that they hurt other people with that behavior, like what was happening to you, but they hurt themselves even worse because those kind of guys, they don't end up with stable relationships. They don't end up, they're usually financially unstable. Their relationships are unstable. They end up psychologically unstable very often. And it's a real painful and difficult place for them.
So you think I'll be okay ultimately based on what you know about me, but those sorts of guys won't be okay?
Well, yeah, it's perfectly fine for you to remain somewhat childish. It's one of the charming things about you.
Thanks.
But it's not acceptable for men to do that. And this is, I mean, it's unfair, but that's life. And women have value simply, we're born with a certain value. And as long as they're not excessively traumatized, that they will retain that value quite well, as long as they don't destroy their own value. Men are born only with potential for value. Where, if you're your average 18-year-old guy, nobody cares what you think or what you say. No one will pay attention to you. If you're an attractive 18-year-old woman, you just have to exist and people will pay attention to you. And it's true.
I know, it just sounds funny. No, you're right.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Over time, men will earn their value, and their value will go up if they behave in a mature way. Women just basically have to not ruin it.
We lose our value the older we get.
Yeah. And some lose it very quickly. Some women I know women who have been in their mid-20s and they were burned out. I remember seeing pictures I remember seeing a picture of a girl that I knew, and she was my age, and I was like, just after I got married, I saw this picture, I'm like, who is that old woman? And she was my age, so she would have been like 25 at the time. And she looked like she could have been my mother. I went to school with girls that by the time we were 16, they'd already had 4 or 5 abortions.
What?
Yeah. They were, they were destroyed before they left their teen years. And then I've known women who had several kids and they're in their 50s and they're still attractive. Beautiful. So yeah, it depends largely on how well they maintain their value. It's just the same way as I know guys who in their early 20s are already quite successful. And I know other men that will never be successful, no matter how old they get. And this is really part of the challenge today, is that there's no clear path towards any kind of a success. We used to, both for men and women, we had a clear path to success. And our parents had a lot to do with helping us pick that path, but there wasn't a lot of options, and all the options were good.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, we have all these options that no one's ever tried before, and we're going to be the first one down this new path. And it turns out that 80% of the time it's terrible and it's a nightmare.
Sad state of affairs.
So I have a question for you guys. How many new people have you met in the last 6 months, roughly?
Well, you already know, Noah, because I talk to you quite often.
Yeah, but this is for the public, and you don't have to be like exact numbers, but
I think 4.
Yeah, 4 people in about 6 months.
Yeah, which is, I could be doing better. I know that.
How about you, the other 2?
I mean, if we're talking in real life, I haven't really met people, but it's also my frame right now is not with the intent of going out and meeting new people. I'm building old relationships, and then the ones that, I've met a lot of people online, a lot of important people online. So it's also facilitating those relationships, and then also focusing on building a framework for myself so that when I do have to quote unquote integrate back into society after this whole scandemic is over, that it's easier to do. But yeah, as far as meeting new people goes, I meet people, but I don't really, the relationships haven't been maintained or grown after the initial meetup.
Yeah, that's you are at least taking some steps towards keeping yourself social. How about you, Anne?
When London went out of lockdown for a few months over the summer, I went out with some girlfriends because oh my goodness, places for drinks were actually open again and you could sit outside distanced without masks. Wow. And I met someone out that night and I went out for dinner and drinks with him 2 times, but I was moving to Greece anyway in September, so nothing eventuated out of that at all. But he seemed like a nice person. Probably not someone that I would feel completely connected with, but he was nice. But yeah, that's the only person. Other than that, I chat online with some people now and then, but kind of a little bit more going sort of, I don't know, doing some inner work and things like that too, for when, you know, we can actually physically, just easier when people are more likely to come out. It's a tricky one because lots of people are really scared of the pandemic and fearful and stuff. And I'm not. So
Well, yeah,
just
what you're all facing is actually what everybody's facing. I did a poll and almost everyone said they'd met no one in the last 6 months at all. You guys at least have met some humans, other human beings.
Well,
And David, you have the advantage too that you have access to your family. That gives you a huge advantage as well. And yeah, with that difficulty in meeting people, see, it's not just meeting people you'd want to date. It's meeting people who you might want to date. Or
true.
I met my wife because I was on vacation, and my friends who were from the country where I was in Portugal, where I was on vacation, they had friends who knew my wife. So it's like I met some friends who had some friends who knew some people who knew my wife.
That's amazing.
I like that.
Yeah, it's the great thing about it is like, okay, I like her. Now I'm going to go and ask the people that I spent a couple weeks with about her that actually know her and that know me a bit. And I'm going to and I'm really good at interrogating people. So I get the truth of what's going on. And also I understand that if you ask 5 people about someone and they all tell you the same story, it's probably true. If they tell you different stories, somebody's probably being a little too nice or a little too cruel. And to kind of balance that out, I asked people, so then I was able to find out things about her. But that social network building, you know, we should be engaging in that on a regular basis. And how can we do that under COVID? It's difficult. You brought up something interesting: is people are very afraid. As I said, I like to. I'm bold in, you know, the photo of my beard that's correct length. It's now down to my down to my sternum. And,
I know. Dude.
Yeah, I like to, and I'm now gotten quite muscular. Nothing to do but work out during lockdown. So I feel like I'm, you know, one of those prison movies and you just get to work out all day. And so I will go and, like, you know, I'm walking up across people on the road and I just look at them and I'm like, smile and be super friendly, which is a little scary to people if they're scared of no one with a mask. But whenever I see someone without a mask, they look like, oh, thank God, another real human being.
Yes,
It's the most wonderful thing ever.
People are scared to live right now. They are literally scared to live.
Well, I've got a bunch of Russians that live in my area, and all of us are like, none of them wear a mask.
I love that.
Yeah, because they're like, I don't care about dying. They don't care. And I mean, they're you know, they're smoking at the same time. They're smoking because they're Russians. You know, they're smoking and probably just were drinking vodka 10 minutes earlier. And they're out walking in the street with their like 6 or 7 kids, and they're you know, they're not gopniks, but they're not always like the wealthy Russians either. They're like middle class Russians, and yeah, they're completely unafraid. Their kids are running around fighting. None of them wear a mask either, and fighting and doing boy stuff with each other, and all the girls giggling in the corner. And it's very much like. It's more the healthy attitude because they don't speak the language here, so they don't get the propaganda. And I don't see that Russia really gave much of a care about this lockdown. I don't think they're doing it. So it's a very different mentality. You know, even when I come across Portuguese people who aren't wearing their mask, it's like we almost want to hug each other.
There's a brotherhood. There's a camaraderie automatically developed, right?
Yes. Hail, fellow maskless person.
That's the same with me in shopping centers. I look around and I'm like, oh, you're not wearing a mask. And we just sort of nod at each other like, yeah.
Oh, I love that.
I go places where you're supposed to wear a mask. I don't wear the mask. I just go in and I do my business and nobody says anything to me. I can tell they're trying to figure out what they should say. But by the time they figured it out, I've already done my business and I've left. I'm a man, you know, I don't dawdle when I'm shopping. I'm in, I'm out, and I'm quick about it. So it's and they're looking at me trying to figure out what to.
Okay, there's stuff going on. Do you guys have the same thing with masks?
It depends. So I live in the United States in Illinois, which is a very democratic state. And in my city in particular, but my city in particular, it's more Republican.
Good.
But our mayor is not. So we have a mask ordinance, or at least last I checked, where they're like, oh, you get fined if you go out without a mask on.
Yeah, we do too, but I still don't wear it.
Yeah. So, but the flip side is I don't go out a ton, and it's not because of the pandemic. It's just I don't need to. But when I do, I usually go out with friends, and we won't wear masks because I've noticed if you go in just one without mask, you'll get kind of singled out. But if you go in with a few people, it's more tolerable.
Power in numbers sort of thing. Huh?
Yeah, roll in with a big crew.
An intimidation factor. It's worked. It's worked. The best part, though, is when you go in there and the few of you don't have masks on, and then you can watch a few people take theirs off. It's just like, oh, thank God. I have permission.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and that's our job as men, David, is that we have to take the lead in society, and that includes the lead in facing unjust laws, unjust regulations. In most of the cases, these aren't actually laws; they're regulations.
Exactly.
You technically can flout them with impunity unless you're in a place like Canada, where apparently the police enjoy beating people with sticks over it. That might not be the most fun thing, but it is our job to resist the things that are wrong in the world, and we shouldn't be forcing the women to do that. We shouldn't be leaving it up to them, because like Anne said, when the men don't do their job, the women end up having to man up, and we don't want that to happen. And guys are like, before COVID, all the guys are like, oh man, we have no chance to be heroic anymore. There's no new frontier to settle. There's no chance for men to do something, to stand out anymore. All of a sudden COVID comes along and I'm like, here's your chance, man. Stand up. You can do something, do something. And I think I'll wait for the next opportunity. And this is a golden opportunity, I can't talk about some of the things that are going on, but like even my 7-year-old son, when he sees opportunity to flout the regulations and make it, remove, let's say, police tapes from places that's stopping us from enjoying things which our tax money paid for, he doesn't hesitate to do that. And he's 7 years old. So men, we need to stand up more. You want to attract women? Stand up and be counted. Do something bold.
Or pay attention when the woman drops the hanky.
Yeah, and pay attention. I was talking with a client today, and he's really concerned because his church is closed. It's not opening up. And I said to him, first century Christians were told, worship the emperor or get thrown to the lions. And they're like, okay, throw me to the lions. And now it's like, you got to stop worshiping Christ at your church, or we're going to give you a fine. And you're like, then I'm not going to church anymore.
Yeah, we've become weak. Christians are weak as shit now.
Well, you Christians have become weak. Everyone has become weak, and
that's
when
true.
Everyone is weak. Those who are not weak stand out even more. Those who stand up and be counted are more observable than ever before. And if you're a man and you want to get noticed, if you're a man and you want to get noticed, take that mask off and damn the consequences. You're going to get noticed.
Yeah, and I'll be like, ooh, that guy is getting arrested. That's a turn on.
This is
Dia
an
will
interesting
rock
question.
up to the jail.
Yeah, we'll walk up to the jail and be like, okay, who wasn't wearing masks? These are our men.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, if you're willing to go to see the thing that women are concerned about with men, and this is an age-old thing, is does he follow through on his commitments?
Hopefully.
Because a man either follows through on all his commitments or he follows through on none of them. We don't like randomly do it. And the kind of guy who says, I'm not wearing a mask and I don't care if I go to jail over it. That guy's also going to be, okay, yeah, we're going to get married and I'm going to forsake all others, as my marriage vows say, and I'm going to be loyal to you. And I don't care what anyone else thinks about that. You know, he's going to be the kind of guy who follows through on all his vows. And that's just like, that's a hard thing for men to think about nowadays because we've been taught to be too obedient. Someone mentions here, one of the readers or the viewers, how can a maskless woman entice a maskless man to come over and talk to her?
One should just walk up to the other. The
Yeah,
bolder
being
one.
maskless helps. Just that. Like I go and talk to everyone I see is not masked up. I've been saying this since the beginning. Beautiful women are not wearing masks.
Thanks.
No, it's true. The attractive women are not going to cover up their face. And there are some attractive, but also very fearful women that might be doing it. But in general, if you go anywhere, attractive women, I see them they're the least likely to wear masks. Now, I've noticed too that in general, people are not dressing as nicely the last few months as they normally do. Everyone's kind of slumming it. You know, like track pants and t-shirt when they would have worn something nice a few months before. And so, yeah, basically just don't wear a mask and be attractive. Yeah. Doesn't want to smear her lipstick. Exactly. Just be attractive without a mask and you're going to get attention.
For sure.
Yeah.
There's like this unwritten code with that.
So guys, ask me. Have you got any questions that we haven't covered today? Anything you want to ask me about dating that you feel brave enough to ask in the public?
Nothing that I can think of off the top of my head.
Great. I want to recommend to go ahead, Dia.
No, I said I'm just thinking if there's a question I want to ask you. But
Yeah,
sorry, keep going. What
while we're talking.
I
Let me know.
I do have a piece of advice for listeners, for people. The thing that I'm thinking, right, is after whenever this pandemic rolls around or people are able to go out and socialize more in a traditional sense, it may be wise for some people, especially those who are nervous about getting back into the dating market, to not jump right into it, but to find other people that can kind of help them grow or get their frame back, right? So if it's a man who's concerned about going into the dating market because he feels rusty, doesn't know, how to approach women anymore, it'd be good for him to go find other masculine men who are either doing those things or who have already done them. So that way they can kind of build those relationships and in turn channel the confidence back into themselves. And then for women, of course, to do the same thing, find other feminine women and, commune with them, build that fellowship to kind of sharpen yourself.
We're not just rusty about talking to the opposite sex. A lot of us are just rusty about socializing.
Yeah.
And there's, talking to if you're a guy talking to a beautiful woman and talking to just a person, like an old lady or whatever, there's a huge overlap in those social skills. And if you're having a hard time talking to a beautiful woman that you want to talk to, get in some practice, like you said, talking to some, start with other guys, or for women, start with other women and work your way back into it. I think that we're going to make a shift we're going to ball up into small communities, which overlap and take care of each other better. The absence of community is really hurting people more than it was before. We could kind of pretend with social media that we had communities, And everyone's getting to this point, and this would have happened with or without COVID, where that's not really cutting it anymore. And I think we're going to start joining up into little communities. Doesn't mean we're going to live in the same general areas, but maybe we're in the same city, and we're going to get back to a lot more face-to-face the moment that it's possible again. I even think before it's legal, people are going to do that, but they're not going to do it in public spaces. They're going to be over at people's houses. They're going to have very quiet little house parties, very quiet little gatherings together, because we need socialization. Humans are a social creature. We need it like we need food. We will suffer psychologically and physically if we don't have people in our lives.
For sure. I thought of a question. It's just a general question, but so obviously statistics and some of my YouTube videos also touch on this. Women who have had too many sexual partners, we know that means that their marriage is unlikely to last. But why is it that men who have had plenty of sexual partners can still, like, any woman that's had over 11 sexual partners, I think is what they say, can't have a long relationship or whatever. But a man that's had over 50 can still manage to get married and hold one woman down. Why is that?
I'll interject with mine before you go, Noah.
Okay,
I think the easiest way to explain it is because a man can more easily have sex without any emotional attachment, where it's more so it's almost, I mean, you could almost think of it as some guys, they hook up with women, but they're not even having sex with her. It's more so just using her almost as a way to masturbate.
Basically, she's a human fleshlight.
Yeah. Men can have sex and there's really nothing attached to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I don't have that problem.
Women almost always.
I don't have that problem. I just wanted to know. Sorry, go ahead, Noah.
Women almost always believe that they're in the marriage market. So when a guy shows sexual interest in them, they don't go, "Ooh, I'm gonna get laid." They go, "Oh, I could have a relationship with this man. This man actually likes me," and he may not like you. He may just like certain parts of your anatomy. Mm-hmm. And the man, he's pretty clear about, must put seed in woman, and he's not necessarily thinking about anything beyond that. And so for him, he's not getting a pseudo relationship and then breaking it over and over again. He's just planting seeds. Whereas the woman, she's thinking, "Oh, it's love, and I'm going to bond with this guy." And then that gets broken. And eventually she's like, "I can't trust my instincts anymore. I can't trust men. I can't trust that I can bond. I guess this is never going to happen." And then she's really broken. And then she'll shift into that masculine mindset as well. Also, what gives both men and women the security for a long-term relationship is masculinity.
Oh,
in the
absolutely.
woman's case, she gets it from the man. In the man's case, he gets it from himself.
Yeah.
Men can provide that masculine order and structure to themselves. Women can't provide it. They need a man to do it. They can pseudo do it, but it's never not the same. It's not the same thing.
It's not authentic. Yeah,
it's not authentic, and it's not. I mean, they can get that to some degree from church through, if your church is masculine, they can get it from a little bit from a male mentor. But really, they need a man to invest heavily into them for them to get that kind of structure. Someone asked, "Is this live?" Yes, it's live. They don't get that investment, then they don't have that chaos-reducing quality in their life, and you need that in order to bond. So it's the other thing too is it's not just how the woman feels; it's how men look at a woman that's had many sexual partners.
But do guys care about that in this day and age? Aren't we living in the era of
guys pretend not to care about it. Guys pretend not to care about it,
but they still do.
Look, really, if you're a guy and you're a 4, and there's a woman who's a 7 and she's interested in you, but she's had a lot of partners, you're like, you probably don't care, because you're just lucky to have an actual woman that was born a woman interested in you. Okay. She's not an anime figure or a doll or your imagination. She's real, and you're desperate.
Yeah.
But if you're a high value guy, you're not going to be interested in that.
What if the guy had a high value girl and abused the dynamic and the trust and all those other factors?
Well, yeah, no, the women get into that situation largely because, not largely, but they often get in that situation. There's a couple of reasons too why women have, men who have a high sexual partner count are usually men who have a lot of capabilities. So they're very persuasive, they're very seductive, they're usually good looking, they're usually successful in multiple areas. And especially if they're having sex with attractive women, that's hard. You know, that takes a lot of effort. For women who have high sexual partner counts, it's usually because they have very poor impulse control. All women have to do to get a sexual partner is to go, I'm here and available, and bam, there's 3-4 guys ready to service her right away.
Yeah.
For men, it's not that easy. There's a challenge involved with getting laid. And there are some guys that are at such a high level that it's not much of a challenge for them anymore. But for most guys, it's not easy. And so there's a very different dynamic. It sounds silly, but there's that pseudo Chinese proverb that, you know, key that fits in many locks is master key. A lock that works with many keys is broken lock. It sounds humorous, but and I'm not praising guys that are out there having lots of promiscuous sex. I don't think that's good for society.
Neither do I.
I really don't think it's actually good for the guy in the long run either.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think the damage done to the men is quite underestimated by society, and it's what I have observed, and it's also generally a net negative to society itself. You seem like you have to say about it, David.
You go, David.
Oh no, I was just adjusting my position.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're heading in about an hour now, and this is about how long I wanted to talk for. It's been really fun having you guys on. I think we've had an interesting discussion. And if you're listening to this discussion and you want to know more about successfully dating with the purpose of having a relationship, a long-term relationship, maybe marriage is what you want in your future, check in the description of this video below, and you're going to see a link to a course that I'm doing with a woman who is a professional dating coach as well. And between the two of us, we've come up with a program that first we used with her to help her find her husband. And now both of us have been using it for years with our clients. It's very effective. It helps people to find someone they're compatible with. And it even works under lockdown and in COVID regulations. And we're filming the last 2 sessions live, one tomorrow and one next week on the Sundays. So you're welcome to join us. And if you join that course, it's on Gumroad. You'll be able to have access to all of the videos that we made in the past as well. Thank you very much, Dia, Anne, and David.
Thanks.
It's been wonderful having you on, and looking forward, perhaps we'll do another chat in the future.
Us four? Awesome.
That'd be fun.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
that'd be
much.
great.
Lots of insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Anne. And if anyone wants to, also feel free to contact me. You can DM me on Twitter. You can go to my website, smv4k.com, and contact me through the forums there. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thanks.
Thank you for
Thanks.
watching our video, and I hope it inspired you to take action in your life. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video to get more agency building content. The real secret sauce is in our newsletter. Click on the link in the video description below to sign up. I promise I won't flood your inbox, and anything that we do send you will be of high value.